Hi, I'm Tracy Swedlow, and this is Televisionation. I am really excited to have Hadassa Gerber, who's the Chief Research Officer of the TVB, otherwise known as the Television Bureau of Advertising, although people don't really use that title very much. It's the TVB. Welcome to the show, Hadassa.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're really interested to hear about a number of reports that you guys have been doing to cover what's happening in the TV industry. Your focus primarily is local broadcast and local broadcasters and their needs and how they monetize and what's happening, how people respond to local broadcasting. So there's a lot to find out because a lot of trends are moving in that direction, and there's a lot of development going on in the world of local broadcasting. So it's heating up, and we want to understand better what the TVB's voice is in all of this, what your opinion is, and what your constituents are saying, and the people that you're talking to in the field. And I want to point out also that not only are you a researcher, but you've also worked for many years in the agencies, and I believe Young and Rubicam and DeWitt Media, McCann Erickson, all the big names. So you definitely have your your background is on both sides of the aisle. And so definitely would love to hear more about what's going on over there. How are you? Where are you?
Okay, so I'm in Manhattan, and I live in Manhattan, and we were very first hit in March very strongly. And what we did was at the TVB, with my responsibilities is to advocate for local television stations and their assets. That's what the TVB does. And so we do research. We do research that looks at what consumers are using, and especially during COVID. So we did a study in the 10 most affected states. That was in April. And then we did a subsequent study in September. It was a national study of how people were being impacted by COVID and the media that they were using. And the amazing thing is that when people really need news that they can trust, they go to local television. So I'm going to share with you some slides from some of the studies that we have done, if that's okay. So this was the second study that we did in September, and it was a national study. And what was interesting is if you compare it, we asked the question is, how has the virus impacted your daily life? So when we went out in April, and these were in the 10 states that were really impacted by COVID at that time, 69% said that they were either dramatically impacted or quite a bit. And now we come to September, and nationally, that number is still at 48%. And that was before things started climbing up.
But how do you define impacted?
Well, they defined it themselves. If we said what are the grades of impact that COVID has had on your life, and two of the choices were dramatically and quite a bit, and some of them was somewhat, and then it was not at all. And you had some people that were not at all, but they were very, very small percentage. And so we're just looking at the top two boxes here. Those that said that it was dramatically, and you could see in April, 33%, that's right over here, said that their lives were dramatically impacted. And then you combine that with quite a bit, it was 69%. So that's 7 out of 10. But again, that I was concentrated in those states that were really, we knew were being impacted. So in September, we went out again, but this was nationally. So we went out to the entire United States. And for the entire United States, it was 48% were those top two boxes. But we did look at the time that we went out, the exact dates that we went out. We took a look at what states during that time were being impacted. And we're not necessarily big states. We didn't have enough to break that out into individual states. The study that we did in April was huge. We did 1,000 respondents in every single one of those states. So that was a 10,000 respondent study. It's really big, but the national study was 5,000. But if you look at those states at the time in September that were most affected, that number goes up to 56%. That was in September. And so I think that was really quite huge that there were so many people that were still being impacted. And interestingly,
I
the
think they're about,
younger people,
I think they're about to be impacted even more by the end of the year, right?
oh,
With evictions
right
and
here in all the states. It's so unfortunate, but that is the story between now and until we have the vaccine that's out there, certainly during the winter time when people can't get out and they're indoors more. So yeah, but it was the young people who said that they were impacted the most because they're used to getting out and going out and dining. And I'm not showing you all the slides, but we also looked at a question of mothers, and mothers were more impacted than the general population as well. That was another interesting finding. So are they staying home? So those 10 states, 68% said they were almost exclusively at home, with the exception of errands, going out and going to doctors. And now the 10 states that were most affected in September, that number was 45%. But when I took a look at this number of 40% nationally, I was really amazed that in September, 40% of the population were still staying at home. And so, of course, when you do that, that could be a very good story for some and not such a good story for others, because a large percentage, when we went out in April, 17% said that they were staying home because they were out of work, and they were out of work because of COVID. And so now the number went down 14% in the 10 states that we went out in September that were most affected, and 11% for the national number. And about,
Mhm.
yes, I'm sorry.
No, I'm surprised. I mean, we're not here to necessarily talk about job loss, but it's interesting that they felt that less people had lost their jobs, that they've been able to find something, but not by a large percentage. Most
No.
people are still, I think, at home and their jobs are still at risk or they've lost it.
Well, we found that 42% of those who were still working were working from home, and 58% had gone back to work nationally. So that was good that 58% have gone back. But the upshot of this is when people are home, they are spending more time with media in general. And what we have found, they're spending a lot of time with television. 84%, this is the percentage that were reached in one day when we did this study in September. And there's nothing that come close. And I have to tell you, Tracy, we have done lots of studies like this, and television has the highest reach.
But is that local
Every,
broadcasting? I believe you're going to go.
that's all television, and that's television in general. But we have seen, I didn't include every single slide that I have, but we have seen actually from Nielsen information, and Nielsen themselves has come out and shown that the percentage of people that are watching news, certainly in March, it was skyrocketing. But even when it leveled off, it was still much higher than the previous year. They're watching a lot of early evening news and late news, and young adults were watching news. That was an amazing increase.
I wonder if that was driven by the election, or if that's just in general that people.
Oh, no, that was driven by initially just wanting to find out what was going on with COVID. And in fact, when we asked the question, which source do you feel gives you the best information and updates on COVID? So 50% said broadcast TV news, and 25% said cable. And all the others are like teens and single digits. So really that has been a main source. And when it comes to local news, people trust it. And we found that from multiple studies. It is the most trusted platform for news. You see here it is at 79%. And if you follow along, here's cable news at 66%. And all the way on the right, you have social media, which is at 39%. And I have seen this time and time again from studies that we have done. People use social media, but they don't trust the news that they get from social media.
What's the age range for this?
This
for
is
these
adults
responses?
18 plus. This is adults 18 plus. But we have broken this out even for 18 to 34. And the trust levels for social media are higher, but it's still the lowest ranking out of all of the media news. that's there. So they're using it, but they themselves, even young adults, don't necessarily trust the news that they're getting. And it's not only us that's saying this, because this is from Gallup and Knight Foundation. This was done in April. And these are the ratings of news coverage of coronavirus. And here you go, TV stations in your local area that had the highest percentage saying that there was, the coverage was either excellent or good. And we know that, and especially during COVID, because COVID is localized. I mean,
Yeah,
local
so
television makes sense all the time, but in these days, and I'll get to that a little bit later because things are opening up and closing at different rates. It's very important to recognize the power of local television, local in general.
so were they specifically saying that types of content were important to them? News about hospital, situations or
Boy,
emergency
you're leading
services?
me into we asked exactly that question.
Okay.
You're good. You didn't even see this slide.
All right.
We said, what were your reasons for watching local broadcast TV during as it relates to COVID? And the reasons were they want information where they live. That was the number one reason, 68%. And the second reason was they trusted it. They trust the news from the local broadcast station. That was 54%. And then they want to know what's open, what's closed, what's doing with the schools. And that's all local information. That's 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are other reasons. Their station is giving them information they need to keep safe, and they're constantly updating, giving the latest information, and they want to know about their neighborhood. But it's really because they want to know the information where they live. And if you watch local news, they go into different neighborhoods and they report from those neighborhoods and let people know what's going on.
Did you study the efficacy of local broadcasting? I mean, sorry, local advertising and how that informed or helped these viewers who say that they trust local
Well, they
broadcast?
trust. We know that they trust, and we've had other studies that we know that when it comes to like fake news, it's uh, social media is very high on those who think that it has a lot of fake news. Cable is second behind social media, and actually, I think I have a slide on that. And local television is like in the single digits. So, yeah. They trust, and I can't tell you how many different studies I have done with different vendors, different questionnaires, and it all comes back to the same: the high level of trust that people have with local television stations.
I think it's an interesting uh, statistic because it's obviously the people or the stations or their reputations that they trust, because I'm sure that the viewers were also watching the transformation of these local broadcasters in front of their eyes as the local broadcasters had to figure out how to shoot their reporters, how to create backgrounds, how to get the news, to them from other parts of their city. And I know that the local broadcasters were doing a lot of, tweaking of their technology, of their systems, of the mechanisms to bring this news, to their audiences. So there's
Mhm.
this massive transformation just producing the actual news and the
That's right. And
viewers.
you also have to remember that local TV stations are very involved in their communities. I mean, you could see their vans coming around in your own neighborhood. I see it. So there's a special connection that communities have with local television. And in COVID, which is what I alluded to, we don't have a national COVID plan. There's no national COVID reopening plan. It's only local. I have to tell you, one of the things that we do here at the TVB, and it is quite a task, and anyone can get this, by the way. It's on our public site. We go in each week in all 50 states, and we take a look at who's opening, who's closing, what is going on in every single state. And we tell you, okay, these are the major changes. This was, I just did the screen grab. This was from November 18th. This is, we changed, there are changes in Alaska and California and Idaho and Iowa, all of these, there was like 14 states. We started this back in like April. And I thought, all right, there would be some changes and then we kind of coast. But I have to tell you, it has changed every single week. And especially now with the increases. And so this, as I said, you could just go onto the TVB site and it would be available to you. But it really demonstrates why local television and local plans are so important, because there is not the same thing happening in every state. It varies on a state-by-state basis and a market-by-market basis. There are rules for states and there are also rules for metropolitan areas that are different.
Well, how does the TVB feel about, the ATSC 3.0 and how it's going to serve the local broadcasting community?
Well, we're looking forward to it. It is not yet. It is functional in a few areas, but it's not nationwide. And when that happens, we'll be able to offer a lot of things that we're currently not able to do. But at this point in time, it's not throughout the entire United States, and many areas it's still being tested.
I know you have more slides to show, but one thing I'm interested in, and I know you don't have any data on this, but at some point it would be great to do a study in the future. I'm sort of projecting here on the relationship between local broadcasters and their ability to educate, either using ATSC 3.0 services, and how television is used as an education platform, that, with or without advertising perhaps, but I'm just putting that out there for you for the future.
We'd love to come back to you. We have people who are have greater expertise in that area than I do, and I'm sure they'd be very happy to talk to you.
All right, sounds good. It's glad to know you guys have your finger on the pulse.
We do.
What's happening?
We do, and we have. We had a virtual, we call it our forward conference, and it was all virtual. It's unbelievably great conference. It was really terrific. And we had multiple panels that spoke to a lot of these issues that you're raising throughout the day. And I'm sure that if this is something you'd like to revisit on another a session, that we'd be more than happy to get you people to talk about it.
That sounds good. I think that is an important thing that could serve, people in real ways, right? And kids in their homes who don't have access to computers or don't have access to Wi-Fi, whatever it is. Anyway, I know you have other slides that you want to show.
Yeah, I'd be happy to show that to you. So one of the things that we see that's happening during COVID is people are shopping online. And what they don't realize is when it comes to television and digital, it's not an either or an or situation. It's an and situation, because television actually helps and drives customers to websites. And also they are the medium that most influences shoppers who are online shoppers. And this was from a study that we did earlier this year. It was at 24%, and their motivation to do further research online. So has an advertisement on television motivated you go to the internet to find out more information? Look at this. For online shoppers, it's 61%, that's 6 out of 10 said yes, that television did motivate them to do that.
But with numbers like this, it still astounds me that the powers that be, who could lay the proper software down onto these connected TVs, are not, have yet to launch T-commerce, right? Interactive, the ability to buy things on your television while an ad is playing, direct commerce. It astounds me. It does astound me. It does astound me. Thank you.
Okay, if I have time, we also did a home improvement purchase funnel study. And what this does is basically, we do interviews and we try and find people, in this case, who were in the market. Home improvement was booming, really was booming during this time. And so we want to get people who have were in the market for home improvement and also saw ads so that we could see how these ads impacted on them and which media platforms had the greatest influence on them as they went through this purchase decision cycle. So this has nothing to do with the platforms. And I thought it was very interesting. What were the incentives that got them during COVID-19 to take on a home improvement project? The biggest reason, 30%, was because they were home. And it would make it easier for them to supervise. And then there were the discounts. And then there was a quarter of them said, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not traveling. So I'm taking that money and I'm going to reinvest it into my home, as were people who said the economy is too uncertain. So I decided I'm going to renovate what I have rather than go buy a new home. So this was just some of an interesting sidebar. But we did look at over 20 different media platforms, including all of these digital. And what we found was the biggest influence, the most important influence, was television. And we looked at awareness and interest and getting information and consideration and then actually making the purchase. Well, all of this blue, that's television. That
Is
means
that
41% picked television. Look at there's no close second.
But I would say, how are you defining television? Are you including live streaming? Are you including YouTube? YouTube as a...
This is broadcast and cable.
Okay.
This is broadcast and cable. We do have streaming TV. Those numbers are very low. It's like 3%. Remember, they have to have seen an ad. And some of the top services like a Netflix, they don't have ads. So if you want to reach consumers and let them know about your service, television is the way to go. And within that television of broadcast and cable, most of that is broadcast. 62% for the awareness cited that what was most important was broadcast television.
I mean, if I were advising someone, I would say to, start doing a gardening show, because I've heard there's a huge run on plants and things like this and seeds and people, becoming instant gardeners because of the situation we're in. But
people are spending a lot of time at home and they're taking a look and say, oh, I really should get this fixed. And so there's been a boom in that. But here is also the impact of television on digital, because we asked, has TV influenced your home improvement search selections? And 93% said yes. So they see the TV ad and now they're doing the search and they have to decide which service they want to pick. And they say, oh, I remember. I saw this guy's ad. And I just have to share this with you, because this is someone, and he is in San Antonio. His company is Roof Fix. And he started using everything but television. And a local TV rep really was on his case, and he finally got him to use television. And now this guy will talk to anybody about why they should use television, because he said there's nothing better than broadcast television. He went on, and look at this, he went from a $5 million company to a $140 million company in 5 years. And he did it because he started using local broadcast TV. It's a great television story. And he was in the digital and everything else, but he said, we took our sales close ratio from 30% to 70 to 80% close ratio, because broadcast TV does way much more than advertising for you. It really brands your company and it builds trust in your community. And so what he's saying verbally follows with what we have seen from our own research as far as people's trust of local television. Do I have time to give you highlights?
Oh yeah, that's funny, because I was just going to ask you about the voter funnel study. Would love to hear more, please.
So the voter funnel study, we went in the day after the elections. And we looked at all of these different media types. And, so now we're talking about voting. So we have phone calls and texting, including in that. And so this is very, very recent. In fact, this is the first time I'm talking about this. And we asked questions like, if you voted, how did you vote? Now, the reason I'm showing you Georgia is because they're coming up with a new election very soon.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting here is, here's the red is the Republicans. So 32% voted in person on November 3rd. In general, in Georgia, only 29% voted at the booths on November 3rd. What happened was, look at how many people, and especially Republicans, voted early in person before November 3rd. And then you have the Democrats who voted by mail, 27%. And then people use drop-off box locations. Why is this important? Because look at this timing on the next slide. The percent of people who voted 3 or more weeks before Election Day, 3 or more weeks, which has implications about when you need to start your advertising and how early you have to go in. That means someone could have voted 4 weeks before. And we did have numbers on 4 weeks before. 44% of the Democrats in Georgia, 44% voted 3 or more weeks before Election Day. That's pretty outstanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, all those October surprises they included didn't really affect those votes, which I thought was interesting.
Well, they voted early, right? They voted early. And what was the key motivator to getting people out to go vote? Television. Look at, we gave them a choice. We said you could pick 5 of these. And 65% picked television. It's a huge number.
But here, social media has more traction.
Well, social media has 32% said that it motivated them. But television is twice the amount. So, look, we're not saying that other media doesn't work. We're just saying that local television worked the best and far more than any other platform.
Well, they spent like billions, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of money that was spent, but we have done this at times when there wasn't as much money has spent, and we have seen the same. We did in the midterm elections, we asked the same question, and we saw also that far and away it was television. But it is true, there was a lot of spending that was on television. And when we asked the question, then the same question, so now you're going through your decision cycle for voting, what impacted on you? And look at these numbers. 57% said that in the awareness stage, television was most important. And even for voting, it was 51%. There were more people who said that television was most important in their voting than all the other media combined that we were measuring. And I have to tell you that just because somebody, I didn't include all the slides, but just because somebody is exposed to a message doesn't mean that they think it's important. Because if I would show you that slide, you would see that television has high exposure, but a very high percentage think that it's important. And social media could have exposure, but a much, much smaller percentage of them think that it's important. So let's say this 25% could be exposed to social media, but only 7% said that it was important, or 30% was exposed. I don't remember what the exact number is, but it was somewhere around there. But the proportion of those who said that it was important, it was far lower than those who were exposed to television.
I'm assuming you did not do this same kind of study during the 2016 election?
We did. During the midterms, 2016, we did we did do it in 2016. And we did it in 2015 in Kentucky. We did the midterms in 2018. In 2019, we went back to Kentucky because it was a very competitive gubernatorial race there. So yes, but this year, we and 2016 it was similar results. There was still the largest percentage thought that television was most important.
Yeah, because they blamed the 2016 election, on the internet, for the loss for Hillary. They blamed it all on, what they thought was happening on the internet. It's interesting that you have the reverse results. Um, do you know how effective the ads were themselves? Do you have any kind of tracking on that?
Well, we don't look at the effectiveness of ads because that's a whole different ball of wax. I mean, if you have a poor ad, someone can be aware of it. I mean, television can promote a product, but if the product doesn't do a good job of presenting itself, that has nothing to do with the media of television or or any other platform for that matter. So we do for the TVB does not look at the effectiveness of ads. That's not what we do. We look at the effectiveness of the platform of television and local television specifically. And we ask questions. I mean, fake news has been coming up like crazy. Everything is fake news. So we ask the respondents, where do they find fake news to be most prevalent on? And here you go, social media, 62% said it was most prevalent on social media. And cable, it was 40%.
Oh, yes, look at that. Do you know if has that grown, or is that a smaller number than a previous study?
It varies on the study, but I will tell you that in the order, it is always social media. From all the studies, since we've been asking this question, it's social media is number one, and cable news is number two, as far as having fake news. And it works on both sides of the fence when we break it out, Democratic, Republican, both sides of the fence. In fact, I believe for this study, there were more Republicans that said that there was more fake news on cable news than the Democrats. But we've asked this question a couple of times in many different studies. And number one is social media, and number two, cable news. And you have to go looking all the way somewhere in the middle here for local broadcast news. Local broadcast news is usually single digits.
9%.
9%, which is much, much, much lower. And that feeds into the trust factor. So
actually, it seems like there's a lot of trust for the web apps that they use. They don't feel like they're getting a lot of fake news on web apps for magazines, web apps for local TV news.
Yeah, well, WebZack for local TV news is 3%.
Interesting. I would actually love to hear more about those two top numbers to see how they change, or one of those grows, one of them declines. It'd be very interesting to see that going forward. What's coming up for you and the TVB? What other reports should we expect in the next 6 months or so?
So we have just wrapping up of being in the field with a study that we call our media comparison study. And it takes a look at media consumption and the reach and the time spent that people have with different media platforms. And that is a major, major study. There's no one else out there that's comparing all the platforms. I mean, if you go to a Nielsen and a ComScore, they're all comparing, for the most part, it's some digital and it's some television, but there's no one that covers magazines, newspapers as well. So that's a big study. We should have that by the beginning of next year. And starting, I think on Thursday, we're going out in the field with yet another study on purchase funnel for different categories. retail,
Well, that'll be really interesting.
auto,
Yeah.
QSR. I mean, there are seven different categories. The reason that we did the home improvement when we did is because that's the timing for home improvement. If you want to take a look at a purchase funnel, that timing is during the spring and May and June. So we went out with them, but we have now coming up for 7 categories together. That's another major study that we should be fielding with the end of this week for another 2 weeks, and that should also be coming out next year.
That sounds
Yep.
great. I forgot to ask you, like, what in your purchase report, what were people buying in the home improvement study? What were people purchasing? Did you analyze that, or was that too
We
specific?
didn't ask as specifically what they were purchasing. We did talk about what they were spending. We did look at it based on whether they were living in a city or if they were living, in the suburbs. And it was very interesting, the different influences. The people who are living in the city were more influenced by COVID to do something than someone who was in the burbs. We looked at Hispanic and so for example, Hispanic, their reason wasn't because they were at home. Their reason was discounts, and they wanted to do, they weren't spending money going anywhere. So it is very interesting.
I
But
would say an interesting study would be to look at how many people are baking and cooking, growing their own ingredients, how many TV shows they're watching that are related to cooking. I think that's a massive trend. I remember many months ago, I was talking to the Tubular guys, and we were talking about the obsession with sourdough, which is still going on. And he literally showed me the spike in social media in the early part of COVID that everybody was searching on, sourdough. So it'd be really, I know in my own household that there's a lot of absorbing of shows about, cooking and baking, or actually doing it. It'd be interesting to get a national study. I think that's a side topic, but
that for us though, our calling card is the news, because that's what we produce.
I know.
But we did see major spikes in people looking at the news. And especially, as I said, young adults, which continued on. So that's, I guess, our cooking show is people turning into the news and wanting to know what's happened in much larger numbers.
I think the Food Network needs to pay you to do a special study or something. But I mean, I know that I watched an enormous amount of news in the last several months, probably, and I always do, but because of politics. So I'm sure I'm sure that's an interesting phenomenon going out there. It's exciting to be able to study and see the actual numbers of how people are absorbing this stuff. I think those are all your slides, right, for now?
That's all my slides. That's all my slides. But I have to tell you that the usage of television in general has increased during this time, and it's also linear TV. I mean, Nielsen just came out with their total audience report, and it actually it showed an increase, certainly, of streaming services. But everybody's talking about how the streaming services are biting into linear television. That's not what their study showed. It showed actually linear television increased a bit. So I guess people aren't commuting, so they have more time to do more things as it relates to media. But their particular study did not show in second quarter that it was impacting linear television. It was showing that people were spending more time in general with media, but it was actually showed, I think it was the smartphone, that it was impacting the usage of the smartphones. I guess people are now home, so they use the bigger screens.
Well, I think
I don't have the numbers. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I do know that the numbers for television did increase slightly in the second quarter.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next quarter or next 2 quarters as potentially these vaccines get into the countryside, into the cities themselves, and whether or not people will, come out of their homes, or they're going to stay put. It'll be interesting. I'm pleased to hear all this information. We love the fact that people love television, of course, on Televisionation. That's what we're about. So thank you so much, Hadassa, for bringing this information to all of the viewers today. Really appreciate it. And good luck on those next 2 studies. And I think you've got some events coming up. And don't miss her TVB News Minute that she does, I guess, occasionally. And check out their website. They've got quite a lot of news and information and charts that you can access yourself.
TVB.org.
TVB.org. I'm Tracy Swedlow. That's Hadassa Gerber, who's the Chief Research Officer of the TVB. Thank you so much for being here to hear more about what's going on in the country at large. Take care, everybody. Stay safe out there. Bye, Hadassa. Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.